Good morning. The definition of prodigal says this, it is recklessly extravagant or having spent everything. We are in this new series called Compassion. And if you look at Jesus, Jesus was a guy who came for people. He was a people person, and he came for people. And he saw people through the lens of compassion. And that was his tool. That was his lens. And man, I just think that in this time that we're in right now, we could all use more compassion for each other. And we're going to look at some stories through the Bible. And every single one of these stories has people in it that they didn't know what they need, but Jesus gave it to him, and his tool was compassion. He used compassion. The first story comes through Luke chapter 15. So if you got your Bibles, open up to Luke chapter 15. And he tells a parable, which is a made-up story to make a point. Jesus was pretty famous for this. He would make up these stories to make a great point. And Jesus tells a story about two sons headed down a path of trouble. And neither of them knew what was coming. They didn't see what was coming. I will never forget the day that I accidentally drifted a semi on a curve on a highway. I was working on a farm in Texhoma, Oklahoma, okay, western Oklahoma. My dad had a farm, and we had a job of hauling fertilizer, cow manure, okay? It was a terrible job. And we would do this every day, multiple times. We'd drive this road, and it was out there in the country, and it was just terrible, Highway 95. And it had this little S-curve in it. And I was bored, and so I thought, man, I wonder how fast I could take this curve. And over the days, over the weeks that I was just driving this back and forth, I found out that about 45 miles an hour, you start leaning pretty good. And at 48 miles an hour, you start feeling the rumbling of the truck. It didn't really want to do more than 48. So every day I looked forward to that turn just to give me something to do, you know. And so I'd hit it as fast as I could with being comfortable. Well, one day I was in La La Land. And I forgot about it coming up. And I hit this thing, by the time I woke up and figured out where I was doing 70 miles an hour. And oh my gosh, right? You become super alert in that moment. And I flipped on the Jake brakes, and those are, if you don't know what that's whenever the semis, they have this loud, you know that, and it helps slow the truck down. So I flipped those on real quick, and I didn't want to lock up the brakes because I'd just go right off the highway. And so I started pumping the brakes, and then I just got into the turn, and I said, well, here we go, baby. And so I turned, and immediately the trailer just swung off in the ditch, and it tipped. And the whole, all the fertilizer, all the manure is just going off in the ditch. It was just dumping it all over this place. And I look, and the trailer is like this. I look in the rear view, or in the mirror, it's just bent over like that. All the manure is just going on. I look in my other mirror, and the wheels are off the ground. I mean, it's just going, and you just feel this thing like this, and it's just going crazy. I thought, man, this is it, man. This is it. I'm going to flip over. This thing's going to go. But it didn't. The trailer kept on in the ditch, and I finished the turn, and the trailer just went, and I'm like, yeah! Oh my gosh! And I downshifted, and I was gone. I never told Dad about that. 2 or 3 weeks later, I wasn't the only one that drove that truck, but we were me and my dad were walking around and checking the tires and everything. And I didn't realize what it had done to the trailer. And so we're checking the tires, and he gets around to the other side, and he goes, what the heck is going on here? You know, I don't know. And I get over there. And apparently, when that had tipped the trailer over, it had mashed the wheel well over the tires so hard that the wheel well was in the perfect shape of the tires. And fortunately, like I said, I wasn't the only one that drove that truck. There was another guy named Baldo. And I said, Baldo, man, he must be driving that thing wild. And he goes, Dadgummit, Baldo. I had no idea what I was headed towards. And these two sons in this story are headed down a road that they have no idea the pain that they're about to enter. They have no idea what their decisions are about to lead them into. And they're headed for a life crash. They didn't even know it. Now, it starts from a very real circumstance. In Luke chapter 15, verse 1, look at what it says. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So that's the situation. Now, look at verse 3. Then Jesus told them this parable. So you got two groups of people, the very irreligious and the super religious, right? And the tax collectors, they were the worst of society. They were morally bankrupt. They were stealing and cheating their own people to help Rome continue to dominate the Jews. They were terrible people. But the other group was the Pharisees. And they were morally superior, but they held it as a status of worth, that they were more important because of their morality. And the second group, the Pharisees, they were the target of this parable. In this story, they were the older brother. So then in verse 11, jump down to verse 11. It says this, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Now, in those days, the inheritance worked like this. The oldest son, he got a double share. Okay, so in this case, there's two sons, so he got 2/3. The younger son got 1/3. Now, the younger son says, "Hey, can I have my inheritance?" When do you get your inheritance? When your parents pass away, right? So disrespectful to come to his father and said, "Hey, look, I can't wait any longer till you die. I want my stuff now." Like, can you imagine going to your father and actually saying this to him and saying, "Hey, can I have your stuff now?" Like, that's so disrespectful, right? But he does it. Now, I'm guessing that relationship was strained, right? Now, working for your dad on the farm, that will strain a relationship. I did that, Dadgummit, Baldo. Can you imagine if he knew it was me? I did work for my dad, and it did make me want to speed up wanting to leave home. Because here's the thing, when you work for your dad on the farm, he knows everything, and everything he does is the right way, and blah, 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 right? You don't want to hear that from your dad, right? Like, you want to do it your way. Like, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I want to do it my way. Well, but my way is not always right. In fact, it's usually wrong, but there he is standing there like, "I told you, if you just listen to me," right? I hate that. Well, one day the church was putting in a sand volleyball court, and my dad told me to go get in the semi. Most of my problems come from getting the semi. And he said, "Go get a load of sand and take it to the church, dump it at the church for him." But he gave me specific instructions. He said, "Do not, I know they're going to try to have you bring it back to that sand where they're doing the court. Don't go back in there because you're going to have to do a U-turn and you'll get stuck." I said, "Okay, whatever." So I got a load of sand, took it to church, and there they were, and they were like, "Hey, can you bring it back in here and so we don't have to move it so far?" And I was like, my dad told me not to do it. He's like, "Oh man, it would just be so helpful." And I'm like, "Yeah, it would be helpful." And they're like, "You're probably a good enough driver where you can do it." I was like, oh yeah, I am a pretty good driver. So I said, "All right, I got you." So I went back there, and as soon as I opened up the bottom load and dumped that sand, I just gunned it, and what happens? I got stuck. Well, that was on a Sunday afternoon. And what happens back in the day in the 90s? Okay, what did we do on Sunday evening? Yeah, we went to church. And so my dad was coming to church in in an hour. And I told those guys, I said, we have got to dig this thing out before he gets here. He's coming. He's on the way. We're digging, man. We are digging. Don't even get close. He shows up. I wish Baldo would have been around. Oh, man, he said, why did you do that? And I'm feeling about this big, and he gets in, starts laying in on me. I told you, if you would just listen, I know a thing or two. I know a thing or two. And here you are doing, I'm like, Dad, I was just trying, and here I am. I'm trying to do something helpful. I wasn't trying to do something wrong. I'm just trying to be helpful. Ease up, right? And he's like, look, it's not your stuff. It's when you screw stuff up, you break stuff, I have to pay for that. And we're going back and forth. Well, I had no response to that. He was right, but I wasn't willing to just accept that. So you know what I did to my dad in front of all those people? I waved my hand in his face and I said, whatever. And I waved my hand in his face and I walked away. You ever walked away from a lion? The tingles. I just knew. I was walking away, wincing like this. I just knew I was going to get a punch in the side of the ear, man. I was just all riled up, whatever. In that moment, thank goodness, my dad had enough compassion for the moment just to chill. And he just let it go, right? Man, that relationship can get strained, and it was. Drop dead, Dad. I want your stuff. I want your stuff now. What does the Father do in that moment? What do we do in that moment? When somebody has dishonored, disrespected you, what do we do in those moments? See, in the Middle Eastern culture, the father is highly regarded, respected. And any other father would have driven that kid out of the family. He would have beat him out of that family. But this father doesn't do that. He treats his son with compassion, even in the face of dishonor. And he divided the property. Did you notice that it says he divided the property? Those of you guys that own land, you guys know what this means. Land is not something that you just acquire and get rid of, whatever. It's part of your heritage, that land, right? You guys know what I'm talking about here. It's not just a small thing that you buy and sell like stock, right? This is a meaningful thing. That land means something to you. It has cash value, but a lot of times it's worth more in meaning to you than it is in cash value. But the son, he didn't want the cash value. He doesn't want the land. He wants the cash value. He wants the cash. So he says, just give me the cash. And so the father divides up the land. He's asking his father to tear his life apart. And the father does it out of the great love for his son. He endures the great loss of honor, as well as the loss of love, the rejected love from his son. And normally, what do we do in those moments? We put our defenses up. We say that they don't matter to us anymore. Or we disrespect them, or what do we do so that they don't mean as much to us, so that we don't get hurt as much. But the father remains faithful to his son, even when his son is unfaithful to him. Now the father knows what the son is about to do is not going to be helpful to him. He knows his son is making a mistake. Now, if I can have an aside here, watching our kids get hurt is probably the most painful thing we can do as parents. But it is required for their development. Knowing that they are going to make the wrong choices and allowing them to do that is not easy, but it is required. When our kids are little, we protect them from everything. We have to. But as they grow older, we must stop protecting them from everything. The leash has to get longer. We have to allow them to go through pain. to go through struggle. That's part of their development. If we don't, we are doing real damage to them. We are stunting their development. And really what we're doing is we're not just protecting them. We're not protecting them. We're protecting us and our hearts because we don't want to get hurt. We have to allow our children to make some of those choices that we know aren't going to make good choices. And if we don't, it can lead to either a failure to launch whenever it's time for them to fly the nest, that they won't do that well because they're so dependent on you, or it will lead to resentment depending on their personality. One of the summer before college, I had worked on the farm and I'd got a few $1,000s for spending money. And the first semester of college, I blew it. I blew it all on stupid stuff like pizza. I mean, it was just gone. And I didn't understand money at the time. And so I go home for Christmas and I get a little Christmas money or whatever. But that was gone real quick. And so then I called my mom. I didn't call my dad. You know how that goes. And so I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I am out of money. And I couldn't really work because I was playing college football at the time. And so I was like, can you just give me some money? I just need a little bit of money just to get through the semester and get home. And you know what she told me? Mom, come on, man. And she was like, hey, I love you, but no. I did not expect that. I did not. I was floored. I was shook. And I said, what am I going to do? And she said, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And I was like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be a mom. That's not what moms say, right? Should have called Dad, I guess. I don't know, man. Couldn't call Baldo because he got fired a long time ago. He's out of money. Just kidding. And I had to figure it out, and I did. The two things I did. I was able to find a way to sneak into the Missouri Southern State College cafeteria and eat that way, because I had nothing. I was living off campus. If you open my cupboards, there's nothing. There's no food in there, and I have no money. So I did that, and then I learned that you can sell your plasma twice a week. So I would, pump that plasma and sell that. And that's how I got. And you know what happened? I got home that way. From then on, I didn't have a savings. Ever. I learned the hard way because my mom said, I love you, but no. How hard was that for her? I'm not sure. I know she wasn't laughing about that whenever she got off the phone. That probably had to be one of the most painful things she ever said. But it was one of the best things she ever said. We need to learn to embrace discomfort. The struggle makes us wise. The struggle makes us strong. Now it says that he divided the property, between them, right? So the older brother got his share too. Everything that is left is now whose? It's the brothers now. And it says in verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And it says he set off. And man, I'm going to tell you, running from your problems feels like freedom at first. Unchecked sin or unrepentant sin feels like freedom at first. Sometimes going to a new spot gives us a chance to restart. But unless we've done the heart work inside of us, you just bring your problems to a new place, right? In verse 14, it says, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. See, the thing is that there are problems everywhere we go, right? The grass is not greener. In verse 15, it says, so he went out and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs, right? Our nature is to fix it ourselves. We get in an issue, fix it ourselves. But his problem wasn't the ability to provide for himself. His problem was his failed relationship with the Father. But he was trying to fix the situation himself without addressing the real issue. And I think that maybe all of human history is one long story of us trying to fix it ourselves. But at some point, we've got to figure out that this issue that we have is a situation that only God can fix. That our failed relationship with the Father is not something that we can fix on our own. It has to come from Him. It says it was feeding pigs. Man, we are resilient creatures, aren't we? Allowing ourselves to go to the depths of the pit before we get it sometimes. When you refuse sonship, you choose slavery. In verse 16, it says, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he comes to his senses and he devises a plan. He had burned that bridge with his father, so he's got to come in the long way around. And he thinks if he can just get hired on, then he can start making a wage, and then he can begin to repay the restitution, right? He can earn his father's love back. He can pay that debt that he owes his father. So in verse 20, he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with, and then what's the emotion that you see? What's the emotion that you feel in this moment when somebody has dishonored you, disrespected you? They've taken advantage of you. And then you see them a long way off. What goes in that blank? Anger, frustration, retaliation. What goes in that blank? For the father, it was compassion. Compassion. He was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. He ran. See, heads of families, the fathers in that culture did not pick up their robes, show their legs, and run. It's not honorable to do that. Little boys did that. Maybe the wives would do that, but not the fathers. But we've already seen that the father is not as concerned with his honor as he is with his son. And so he will spend his honor to initiate reconciliation. And he throws his arms around it. See, the father initiates reconciliation. Compassion takes initiative. Somebody has to start the reconciliation. See, if your goal is for them to feel punished, then treat them harshly. But the problem is we cannot throw that grenade far enough that we won't get hit by our own shrapnel. But if your goal is reconciliation, then let God take care of the judgment. You initiate reconciliation with compassion. Then the son, he gets into a speech and he says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father interrupts him and he says to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. The best robe, whose robe would that have been? It would have been the father's. He's going to bring his own robe out to cover this son's nakedness, his shame. And he would dress this peasant son in his finest clothing. The ring was a symbol of authority. And whose ring would that have been? It would have been the father's. And he's going to put the father's authority on him. He would not be a hired servant, but a son to the father. He was accepted back into the family. That's what that meant. Sandals were a symbol of freedom. That he would not be a barefoot slave, that he would be free, and that he would owe nothing. And the fattened calf, man, it was super rare to have meat at a meal. It was very expensive. Only on very special occasions. But the father is recklessly extravagant. He's spending lavishly on the son who has come back. He was lost, but is found. This is prodigal compassion, and he holds nothing back. But not everybody was happy, and this gets to the point of the parable. Meanwhile, the older son was, where was he? He was in the field. That's important. He was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. See, the older son, he kept working while the younger brother was partying. He was in the field doing what he thought he should be doing. And that's pretty typical of the oldest sibling, right? Typically, it's going to be a parent pleaser, where the youngest child is more of a free spirit. So in verse 26, it says, so he called one of his servants and asked him, what's going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father's killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father, what did he do? He went out. So he goes out to both sons, and he pleaded with him. And he went out because the older son was lost too. He was lost as well. But in verse 29, it says, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Look how good I've been. Look how good I am. Yet you never what? Gave me. And all of a sudden we see that both sons did not want the relationship of the father as much as they want the blessings of the father. They wanted the father's possessions more than they wanted the father himself. You never gave me. And then what does he ask for? He says, you never gave me a young goat. Goat? He would have been better if he'd have sent a boat. At least that's something, right? A goat. He's whining about a goat. And he's upset now because the son is received back, the younger son is received back into the family. And what does that mean for him? It's going to cost him. It's going to cost him because now he's back in the family. And the son's getting an inheritance. It's going to cost him. He's going to get his inheritance again. He's already wasted. And now they're left with the remnant of the farm that they have left. And he's done this. They're probably struggling along. And now the father is going to receive him back into the family and give him an inheritance again. It's going to cost the older brother. In verse 30 it says, but when this son of yours who has squandered your property, look what he says, his son of yours. He won't even call him his brother because he was not willing to accept him back in the family. His grace required works. He says, when this son of yours who has squandered your property and with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. He says in verse 31, my father said, you are always, what's the deal? With me. See, that was the father's goal. Was relationship. He said, you are always with me. You have it all. And everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Even when he points the fingers in the father's face, he points and accuses the father of being the bad guy. The father stays latched on to compassion. His son is hurting from broken expectations. How hard is that when somebody's pointing in your face? That you can remain compassionate. He says, everything I have is yours. And that was true. He had already divided the shares, the robe, the ring, the sandals, the fattened calf, all came at the expense of the son because that was all his now. But to him, this expense was not worth it. He must earn his way back. So what does this mean for us? Number one, if you're the younger son, come home. Come home to Jesus. God does not require you to pay your dues because Jesus already paid them. I have 3 kids, a daughter and 2 sons, and we go through this regularly. And I ask them, why do I love you? And they know the drill now. And they always say, because I'm your son. Because I'm your daughter. And I say, when will you stop being my son? When will you stop being my daughter? And they say, never. So when will I stop loving you? Never. You're a child of God. You don't earn your way into a relationship with him. You can't. He loves you because you are his. That makes you worthy because he created you, not because of what you did, not because you're in here, not because you sing, not because you give, not because you got baptized. Look, he loves you already. Come home to Jesus. The other thing is, come down. If you're the older brother, which many of us are, come down from the moral high ground. The path of moralism can be so much more dangerous because we don't see our actual condition. The younger son knew that he was lost. The older brother didn't. Sometimes I feel like the most dangerous thing that somebody could ever do is confront a judgmental person about being judgmental. You're going to be the subject of the next judgment. Man, I'd challenge you to go an entire day without making a negative remark about something or someone. If you cannot do that, it's a problem. But here's a tricky thing. Judgmental people never think that they're being judgmental. You just say, I'm just calling it like I see it. But the problem is nobody's asking you to call it. Why do we feel the need to weigh in on everything? Why do we feel that need to judge what we see? The moment you feel the need to speak negative words, learn to stop yourself and speak the opposite. Instead of judgment, speak blessing. Compassion will always be better than judgment. But the last thing is go find your brother. You remember why Jesus told the story. They were muttering, why does this guy accept sinners? The Pharisees were judging Jesus for bringing compassion to lost people. He actually told 3 stories here. We hit the third, but in the other 2 stories, the lost sheep and the lost coin, all of them have something lost, but in the other 2, people go out to find that which was lost. In this last one, nobody went out. But see, they should have. The brother, where was he at? He was in the field doing what he thought he should be doing. But the older brother needed to be out looking for the younger brother. To be a true older brother meant that it was his responsibility to go out and look for that which is lost, his brother. But he didn't want to do that. And whenever he came home, he wasn't willing to give of his own possessions. It was too much for him. The younger son needed an older brother, but he didn't get it. He got a Pharisee instead. Tim Keller says this, think of the kind of brother that we need. We need one who does not just go to the next country to find us, but who will come all the way from heaven to earth. We need one who is willing to pay not just a finite amount of money, but at the infinite cost of his own life to bring us to God's family. For our debt is so much greater. Either as an elder brother or younger brothers, we have rebelled against the Father. We deserve alienation, isolation, and rejection. The point of the parable is that forgiveness always involves a price somebody has to pay. There was no way for the younger brother to return to the family unless the older brother bore the cost himself. Our true elder brother paid our debt on the cross in our place. Come home to Jesus and help somebody else find Jesus. We're going to be in the back of the room for the next song. If you want to make a decision to come home today and accept Jesus as your Savior, come see us in the back of the room during this next song. Talk to us. Or talk to us after service, or you can even scan this QR code and we will follow up with you. Or if you just want to pray with us for any reason, come to the back of the room. And we'll be there. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for not giving up on us. I thank you that you were a true older brother. We did not deserve it. We will never deserve it. But God, you love us, and we will be eternally grateful. God, I pray for those of us who need to come home that we would come to our senses. We would come home. And those of us who have been judgmental, that we would drop it. And that we would just pick up compassion. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.